Morning. How are you? Fun, right? Another Saturday I'm here. I told you I'd be back. I'm really enjoying these odd little encounters. You and me and you, the two of us together. A short story, some hot coffee. I just feel like it's a capital way to begin the weekend. If you're new to this, MikeRowe.com/podcast is where you can find The Way I Heard It, which I'm happy to say is finding what the ad executives call traction. People seem to like it, and that's great. So if you haven't subscribed, please do. This week I'm going to read a story that went up initially a couple of months ago, and it's so far my favorite. It was inspired by a very similar event that occurred in my life, which I'll share with you very briefly when I'm done. I will also get naked, briefly, at the suggestion of somebody last week who watched this. 615,000 people, by the way, are coming together right now watching this thing. It's kind of extraordinary. But somebody suggested that I sell my robe or auction it off for Mike Rowe. Seemed like an obvious thing to do. Mike Rowe is in the middle right now of a work ethic scholarship program, which means we're giving away about $400,000, which also means we need to replace it. So typically, I just auction off the crap in my garage, and we take donations and this and that. For whatever reason, the robe has generated its own hashtag, which generally means whenever that happens, it's time to sell it, whatever it is. So at the conclusion of the story, I will do that very thing. And over the next week, we'll collect bids, and hopefully somebody will overbid exorbitantly. And this robe and all of the attendant DNA will be hurtling in your direction. But first, the story's called Breaking the Silence. And I hope you like it. I love it. I don't want to overstate it, but I think maybe it's the best one yet. When Donald Crouch first encountered Jim in his English class, the aging teacher found a sullen 14-year-old boy deep in a cocoon of self-imposed silence. Donald might have assumed that Jim was bored or disinterested or maybe even backward. Certainly he appeared to be all of those things. But there was something in the young boy that lit up whenever the subject turned to poetry. It was subtle, but Donald could see a shift in the boy's posture. A quiet but unmistakable enthusiasm that accompanied any discussion of Tennyson or Shakespeare or Chaucer. One day, Donald kept Jim after school and tried to reach the boy behind the stony facade. The problem was soon made clear. Jim stuttered. Not a little. A lot. Donald listened patiently as Jim tried to articulate the humiliation he'd lived with all of his life. Through the stammering and sputtering, Donald saw that Jim had turned to the written word because the spoken word had eluded him. The next day, Donald instructed his English class to write an original poem. The topic didn't matter as long as it was something they felt passionate about. And that's where fate stepped in, as fate often does, this time in the form of a ruby-red grapefruit. During the Depression, rickets and scurvy were a public health issue in Michigan, so the government sent tons of vitamin C up from Florida to help combat the problem. Earlier, that same week, a welfare worker had delivered a crate full of grapefruit to Jim's home, and Jim had nearly swallowed his tongue with delight. It was the most incredible, delectable, mouth-watering food he had ever tasted. That night, Jim wrote Ode to a Grapefruit, a flowery homage to Epicurean bliss brought to life by the full, juicy luxury of eating citrus in the dead of a Michigan winter. Jim submitted his poem the next day, and Donald was stunned by how good it was. So he decided to do something that most teachers today would never even consider. He decided to put Jim on the spot. Donald had noticed earlier that Jim's stutter vanished whenever he quoted his favorite poets. So, later that week, as he returned their assignment with grades and comments attached, Donald addressed the class. "I've read your poems, and for the most part, I'm pleased," he said. Some are quite good, some are excellent, and one in particular is extraordinary. Jim, would you kindly come to the front of the class and read us what you've written? Jim sat frozen in his seat as the blood rushed to his face and the other students stared. Why would his teacher ask him to do such a thing? Jim had trusted Mr. Crouch. Now he felt betrayed. Then Donald said, Jim, I think your poem is too good to be true. I don't think you wrote it. Practically speaking, Jim may have been mute, but his hearing was excellent, and he could not believe his ears. Mr. Crouch was accusing him of plagiarism? Now Jim was angry. If the words are really yours, Jim, prove it. Stand and recite them right now, or admit you stole them. Jim sprung to his feet and recited Ode to a Grapefruit, just as he had written it. There was anger in his voice, but what a voice it was, big and booming and clear as a bell. That was the day Jim learned he didn't stutter when he recited, the same day that Donald Crouch unlocked one of the most familiar voices in the world. As Robert Frost put it, way leads on to way, and Jim's way was suddenly made clear. Jim became a master at memorization. Reciting poetry aloud evolved into joining the debate class. That led to the theater. Eventually, his newfound vocal prowess took him all the way to Broadway, where he was cast as the lead in a production of Shakespeare's Othello, a part he memorized with no problem at all. A Tony Award followed, then an Emmy, then an honorary Oscar. The world, it seemed, was just too small to contain a voice as big as Jim's, so Jim took on the galaxy, a galaxy far, far away. And that is how the voice of Darth Vader was coaxed from the body of James Earl Jones, an immensely talented performer who would likely still be a silent observer in the world around him, but for an extraordinary teacher who understood the power of the spoken word and the unexpected arrival of a ruby red grapefruit that tasted too good to be true. Anyway, that's the way I heard it. I do hope you enjoyed that. It was interesting. I wasn't looking to do a story about James Earl Jones. I was looking for a famous stutterer. And as luck had it, I stumbled across this old, very old YouTube interview where he was talking about his teacher. And of course, those of you who know, I went through something very, very similar. I had a stutter when I was in high school. I had a teacher who cured it. And there it is. Anyway, on to business. It's a robe, and it can all be yours if the price is both high and exorbitant. I have several robes, all purloined from various hoteleries and spas around this great land. This one was purloined from the Calistoga Ranch, a fancy schmancy spa about an hour and a half up the road. The outside, as you can see, is sort of a satin-type finish. There you go, Calistoga Ranch. It's not satin, it's a satin-type finish. The inside is sort of a terry cloth design. There, see it? Yeah, like a towel, very standard. That's not weird, is it? Is it teasy? Is it provocative? Increasingly, I've noticed such a fine line between that which is provocative and that which is just merely horrifying. Anyway, it's a robe. It's a large. I love it. I'm going to part with it for a good cause. You can bid on it over at eBay. I'll throw in one of these, too. Here's a picture of me. I'll sign it and everything. And, yeah, that's it. That's what I'm going to do. This is the robe. What it looks like, there's nothing fancy on the back I need to disclose. It has your basic sash to hold it shut. And, yeah. And now it's goodbye. It's goodbye to my robe. This is the last time I will wear it. I'll wash it if you want. I'll wait. Some people are very, very particular. They prefer to have as much DNA as possible included. Personally, I'd wash it, but I'll wait and see what the high bidder wants to do. There's the photo. Like so. You know what else I'll do, just for fun? I'll throw in the story I just read. a story, a photo, and a robe. Quite possibly the weirdest assortment of booty ever assembled for a good cause. So head over to eBay and bid high and irresponsibly. It's a Saturday, so you should get out there and enjoy it. And put some clothes on.